Hello, everyone. My name is Braden Moided, and I will be presenting pages 230 to 239. So let's go ahead and get started with effective competition. Um, Effective competition was came about when the FCC tried to ensure more competition within the MVPD market. And this came about because the commission noticed how deals between like the bigger franchises and local franchise level businesses were coming about, and they had like buddy clauses and contracts that consisted of not being able to make a facility um, inside of the big company's area, their service area. Um, and then even more like fees above um, the limit, so above the 5% limit. And then they also had extra fees on top of it, top of that if they had other services that weren't cable related, such as like internet. And these were were really bad for the level of competition in between um, services. So there wasn't a whole lot of um, consumer thought behind what they were doing. It was more money, more money, more money for me. And the government was bound to lift their federal regulations if they could prove that um, equal and effective competition was achieved. But like for the majority of the time, um, we didn't see that. It was just the bigger companies um, kind of popping off. Um, and within that, we have within the realm of equal and fair um, competition, we have vertical and horizontal integration. Um, and the FCC wanted to eliminate the dangers of vertical and horizontal integration. And if you don't know what that those terms mean, vertical integration is the combination of one company of two or more stages in production that normally operates at separate companies. So if we go down here to our little diagram, um, we have the supply chain of how a product is made, and then so a vertical integration would be one company owning two parts of this, two or more parts of this. So if the manufacturer decided that they also wanted to be the distributor and the wholesaler, so they were going to make the product, that actually manufacture the product, and then ship it by themselves and then sell it by themselves. That would be vertical integration, but that's when you own the companies that do that. And that can be very problematic because then you're only um, using your cliented stuff and you're not looking elsewhere, which could cost all your workers money, cost everybody money except for you. So that's a problem in and of itself. And then horizontal integration is the one that we mostly know. It's a process of when a company increases productions of goods and services at the same part of the supply chain. So if a manufacturer of pencils um, went and bought out other pencil manufacturers just so they could be the monopoly or the majority, they could make their own prices for those pencils, and that could be a problem. And so same thing for here with the telecommunications world. You don't want so many cable providers all being a part of the same company, because then we will only get one cable price and you have to pay that price if you would like cable. So those are problems. Um, and the 1992 Cable Act has some rules in there that that limit the accessibility of vertical and horizontal integration. Um, so there was a ban between cable programmers and operators um, that was made in the 1992 Act, and it was set to expire in 2002, but then was extended to 2012 um, because um, because having that vertical or horizontal integration could be really really bad. Um, some another thing that happened was that they limited the number of cable networks owned by a larger system operators. So no more than 40% of your channels of the first 75 channels could be used for programming affiliated with that cable system's owner. So you'd have to have 60+% that you, as the owner of whatever cable faction that you're a part of, cable company that you're a part of, can't own the actual channels themselves. You can't even have more than 5% of a share in those channels. Um, Time Warner and AT&T actually challenged this, um, and um, challenged the rules, and the DC Circuit Court of Appeals found the limit reasonable at first, but in 2001 it overturned the rules for the government's failure to adequately justify either horizontal or vertical limits. So they didn't justify. They didn't say like what their limits were, but um, on how far they could go vertically or horizontally. So that was where it got overturned at. However, in 2015, the FCC actually approved of the DirecTV and AT&T merger um, in hopes that it would reach out to underserved rural areas in the nation. So they said that this big corporation and this big corporation, if they combine together, they can be able to use both of their resources in order to better the reach for the nation. And another reason was um, that the rise in internet um, services such as Amazon Prime, Hulu, Netflix, etc., were a problem for all of the small cable companies trying to keep up. So if they merge those the two big names together, it might have a chance of increased competition. And then speaking of these online video distribution options, um, we have it here. And before these options were massively available, it was quite easy to regulate. It was quite easy for the FCC to regulate because they had a consistent benchmark rate that they could apply to. So the number of channels, the cable subscribers, and the pay services. Um, they could measure all of that and then restrict based off of what was doing too well, too poorly, to whatever, to make everything equally and fair. Um, but then the cable companies started, um, their rates started going up between 2% and 6% per year, which spelled disaster for them. Um, and then in 2008, they had the idea that they were going to go a la carte, which meant you only paid for the channels that you use. So instead of paying for all of these channels that you don't use, um, that you only pay for the ones that you like. So if you're a big sports fan, you watch ESPN, you're gonna want to pay for ESPN and not all of the rest of like cartoons or whatever. This was shot down because the executives of the industry said that it wasn't fair to the dozens of less popular channels needing their support, um, and it would and they wouldn't survive on their own. So, and that would eliminate content diversity. However, it wasn't long after that that the internet streaming service um, kind of put a nail in that coffin, and now that's exactly what happens: is you pay for what you will watch, and you don't have to pay for anything you won't. So, going a little bit back, we're going to satellite TV regulation. So in 1977, HBO went against the FCC, and the U.S. Supreme Court actually sided with the cable against the regulation of the FCC trying to regulate the quality and age of the motion pictures that HBO was then at the time very, very new, very, very popular, and the Supreme Court sided with HBO. Um, and then we go to the open sky policy. So in the 1970s, communication satellites were launched into space, um, and anybody could use these. And that was what was known as the open sky policy. Um, However, the FCC encouraged cable networks to draw upon these satellites. Um, it was hard for the FCC to regulate this because they don't transmit over the airways directly to the general public, so there was no way to um, specifically directly impact them. And of course, that wasn't for long because in the 1992 Cable Act, Congress gave the FCC authority to regulate satellite television um, by crafting provisions and dealing with other content issues. And in 1999, the FCC adopted an access rule requiring satellite television services to set aside 4% of their channel capacity for non commercial education and information programming. And then the Shiva Act, so the Satellite Home Viewer Improvement Act, permitted that satellite television systems to provide local TV broadcast channels to all subscribers in their designated market area. And then that in 1999 was revised from the 1998 Act, um, and then and allowed satellite television to offer local broadcast channels to all subscribers within the local market. Um, so it just put a little bit more focus on the local aspect, um, and not so much what they wanted to do. And then another subscription TV service that customers had in smaller sub communities um, was known as multi-channel multi-point distribution services. So MMDS um, as an acronym. And they the an MDS system transmits television via microwave signal. So it was for places such as apartment buildings or um, motels or what have you. Um, and that as long as it was within a private area, the FCC uh, couldn't uh, regulate it. However, if it went, um, it was free of state or local regulations. However, if it went across state lines or across the road, then it was subject to to regulation. So now the telephone companies actually wanted in on this this money pit of video and cable, and so they wanted in on the digital access system, and Verizon versus the FCC. The U.S. Supreme Court held that smaller competitors should have a reasonable access to cable programming channels at reasonable rates. So what these companies did was they used open video systems provision, which was a part of the Telecommunications Act, that they could provide video services um, under this provision and would not be required to grant access to all. So what then came of that um, was the direct broadcast satellite, the telephone company, and the internet all combining into one, and that was what was known as triple play. And then a little bit later, if you had a mobile device, that was quadruple play. So that's the birth of that. And now back to the internet age um, of um, internet protocol television. AT&T actually began offering this service in 2006 for local residents of 11 cities, and then 3 years later they advertised high definition channels within those markets. Um, and it wasn't sure the FCC wasn't sure how to regulate this, um, and by going back in looking at how they've regulated other things, they tend to fall back on what they know, and most of the time falling back on what they know just doesn't work with the new models of um, broadcasting. So um, so in 2015, the FCC finally figured something out, and they passed the new, uh, neutrality network neutrality law, um, and it was a policy of open internet order. But when the administrations from Obama to Trump changed hands in 2017, the perspective of the FCC on net neutrality also changed, um, and there were many people that were pushing for a change in network neutrality. However, there were also a lot of people against that too. So uh, Facebook was Mark Zuckerberg was against it, and the owner of Twitter and Reddit, the owners of Reddit, there were many people that were against this, um, and that was a hot political issue only as of a couple years ago. And so that is pages 230 to 239. Thank you for watching.